But then after you get to tell the story of why you're there enough times and people get used to you, they start treating you like the janitor. You're not invisible, but you're nothing to notice. And in fact, I think that's a photographic talent that you really have to develop as a documentary photographer. You have to be a bit boring. You have to, if you keep talking to people, they'll never ignore you. They'll never get back to their life.
We talk a lot, obviously, about seeing on this show, but what about how you act as a photographer? We help people see. That's what our work is so often about, regardless of genre, really. But sometimes, perhaps the best way of doing that is to become unseen yourself. And, I think today's show is in a good few places a workshop in terms of how you tell engaging stories told by a photographer, Jim Richardson, whose voice you heard there, a photographer who's told stories for such esteemed publications like National Geographic, 2 words that would bless any photographic CV. National Geographic, good enough for me, sir, come right in. And this idea that Jim moots, that perhaps you have to be a bit boring sometimes, be unseen, to meld into the background to make your stories, did get me thinking. Because I believe in a kind of, a mixed approach myself, as actually does Jim, as will become clear. But he is right, there are definitely moments. There are definitely times to engage your unseen being boring mode. And as I say to clients in social photography terms anyway, particularly when talking about weddings, fear not, I say, I am not going to be the ringmaster of your day. So, 2 sides to this subject, because there are plenty of photographers who'd promote engagement as being the real heartbeat of compelling storytelling, where you make a conscious effort to connect with people so you can really get an understanding of their life. I mean, I bring you Claire Thomas, who was on the show only a few episodes ago, a photojournalist who's documented lives in some of the world's most, I think this is fair to say, some of the world's most challenging regions. She spoke about the importance of building trust with her subjects, spending, full pun intended, very focused periods within communities, actually minus her camera, to really get a grasp of their experiences. Claire is certainly one of the photojournalists I've spoken with who really does use this incredible box we hold in our hands as a real bridge to getting to know people. As much as photographing people with it, it's the bridge she needs primarily to get to the places where she can tell her stories. I know I talk about this passport to curiosity being the camera, but I equally like this idea of the camera being a bridge. But on the flip side, many photographers choose a much more detached approach. There's a far more candid nature to their work. There's no right, there's no wrong in this. There's certainly ways to perhaps more effectively tell some stories, as you'll find out today. But yes, some prefer a far more candid nature within their way of working. Henri Cartier-Bresson, the father of modern photojournalism, believed in capturing life's spontaneous moments without interfering or engaging, didn't he? And there's a wonderful quote. This really could have been a quote to be the PS today, but we'll peek early with it. He said, think about the photo before and after, never during. The secret is to take your time. You mustn't go too fast. The subject must forget about you. Then, however, you must be very quick. So, yes, today I talk with my guest, Jim Richardson, about his love for being the unseen, promoting this idea that perhaps there are times that we do need to tap into our boring.
Today on the Photo Walk.
One of the worst things I think that you can do is to be the person who is following along after the writer. The writer is going out doing this text. The text gets approved. It gets sent to some picture editor. The picture editor comes to you and says, go take pictures of these things on this list. It's a terrible way to be a photographer. So there's no grand, selfless mission here. It's just me doing what I want to do. I think the worst way to be a photographer is to sit by your phone and wait for the phone to ring. You always felt that you could survive one mediocre story, but you couldn't survive two.
That's Jim Richardson, my guest on the show today. Welcome along as we make our photo walks together. A show where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, accompanied by the letters and the inspirational stories you send in, plus talking with special guests from around the world. I will take a peek into the mailbag in a moment for a flavour of today's letters, but before that, a hearty thank you to those who believe in this podcast enough that you're Patreon members, or extra milers as you're known, and to a very special partner. A service I use for buying, selling and trading used camera gear is MPB. As a website platform, mpb.com is the place where I can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online. And online guarantees make this a place I feel safe to buy from, unlike some other marketplaces. Here's how it works. You go online to mpb.com and search for gear that you'd like to add to your kit bag. Or if you're selling gear you no longer need, click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading and just follow the very easy instructions. From there, you print off a packing label, stick it on the box with all your gear in it. It's collected by a courier free of charge from your front door. And the best bit, MPB pays you for your camera gear within days. So join me and the hundreds of thousands of photographers every year in the US, Europe and the UK who know that MPB is the place to buy, sell, trade and create. Right then, on the show today, Mark Christensen drops a bit of a checklist what's it shell by demanding the most expensive drink on the menu instead of the coffee I usually dole out. Sam Hopwood crashed his mountain bike last year, which in a twist of photographic fate, never mind the twisted metal, has brought him back to a pastime he'd sort of, well, not forgotten, but wasn't really partaking in. Partaking in, Neil? Have you gone all posh? Yeah, a few times today. Photography, that is. And the last 4 months have been somewhat of a creative revelation. Carl Attwood has been exploring the street with film and making zines to celebrate the art of the print. And Dennis Linden has been revisiting the dangers we talked about when photographing wildfires. Plus, there's this month's new one-word assignment, which I think you'll like a lot. And we have the winner of last month's one about the colour red, which has had me sitting in a darkened corner contemplating, because we had the biggest entry number yet. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Well, check it seems for some. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. Some spare film, particularly important for our friend in Australia land, who you'll hear from later. Check. Or an extra SD card, of course. Check. And a notebook for the wise words to follow from Jim. Let's walk. I was thinking today in terms of the sketchbook pictures I make, because I often walk in the same places, and I did start to feel a bit strangely guilty about that, as if I should be taking you to lots of different places. But I think the letters around the world do that. And of course we do have a certain trip coming up to India. Then of course we're in Scotland. We've got the London encounters coming up. So it's a challenge, isn't it, to go to the same places and come away with a slightly different perspective. So I was thinking in the car, I thought, right, a word. We often set one word assignment, so I'm going to think of a word. And the word I thought about, hold on a second. Pups, out of there. It's gone under a wire, which has been put there to... Pups, it's there for your safety, honestly. Right, yes, the word I thought of today for myself, this isn't the one-word assignment we'll be setting, a new one today, of course, later on, was upright. So I'm going to look for things that have vertical lines. Put your letters and my thoughts down there. Let's get a picture. Here we go, upright. Vertical lines, that's what I'm looking for today. 1100 shutter speed, f5.6, 160 ISO. And Puppy's just gone back under the wire. Come on, out you come. That was a picture of, it's the tail section of a mock-up plane that was built at this airbase that I walk on, Greenham Common, which the fire department used to use to practice fighting fires on. It's a mock-up aircraft, and there we go. That's what's being protected by the wires that Barney's trying to crawl underneath. A shortish one to start the show that has nothing to do, this is letter-wise, with photography. Well, actually, that's not entirely accurate, but the start is really all to do with the coffee that I mention every single week within the checklist, because it didn't even occur to me that there will be folk who really don't like coffee, who are perhaps pretending to just for a little bit of peace and quiet in the staff room. Mark Christensen, who's next week's guest actually on the Extra Mile from America Land, is one of those people. He's one of our extra milers, and he's going to be, as I say, next week's guest on the Patreon Extra Mile show, talking about his life and photography and the 3 photographic genres in particular that he loves: surfing, wildlife, landscape. Tick, tick, and tick. And you'll like this. He chooses to do them all, and we have a discussion about this, for his soul. It's a very soulful conversation. And we also talk about the power of hands, actually, and in particular making a photograph of hands and setting about upon a project. It's always nice to get a note from Mark, and he always signs off with "until our next cup of coffee" as his valediction. Anyway, the latest letter from him ended with, I'll keep signing off with "until our next cup of coffee, Neil, but actually, I'd rather have a glass of water. I don't actually drink coffee. But if it really has to be coffee for the show, could it be one of those frappe things? Are you sure, Mark? You don't occur to me to be a frappe person. A mocha frappe, perhaps, he says. That's a bit closer to a chocolate shake, really, and I do like chocolate. Okay, I understand that now. But thank you for being honest with me. If there's things you do need to let me know about, please do. Mark, it's a bit like when I had to tell my mother-in-law that after almost 6 years, not quite a decade, that I really didn't like her. Oh, sorry, cheap joke. That I really didn't like her red cabbage. Which you might not think is a big deal, but you have to understand that red cabbage is served with absolutely everything in my mother-in-law's house, even dessert. Red cabbage and custard. Don't mind if I do. And, says Mark, have you ever tried Venezuelan sipping chocolate? I think you'll find it's amazing. I can't say I have, Mark. But I did look it up, just in case I might like it. Venezuelan sipping chocolate. Here's what I found. Venezuelan sipping chocolate, rich, velvety, made from high-quality Venezuelan cocoa. Often considered the best in the world. Unlike traditional hot chocolate, it's thicker, creamier, and intensely flavoured, meant for slow sipping rather than quick drinking. Where do I sign up? The cocoa is usually, is it cocoa or cocoa? Cocoa? I've heard people pronounce it cocoa. Cocoa. Is usually dark and minimally processed, allowing the natural flavours to shine. It's typically blended with milk or cream and sweetened lightly, though some versions use spices like cinnamon, vanilla or chili for added depth. Venezuelan sipping chocolate is a luxurious treat, often served in small cups due to its richness. But yes, it does sound nice. I'm not sure they sell it in Starbucks, probably, do they? Or Costa? Or place name of chain here. What would you like, sir? Oh, think I'll take a slice of your finest golden almond torte and a cup of Venezuelan sipping chocolate, please. Served at 57 degrees. Did I mention to you, Neil, says Mark, finally, that you're inspiring me, actually, to start my own podcast? I'd like to interview photographers, in brackets of course, but also people that are behind the scenes, doing creative things, or things the general public doesn't think about. Some people I know, a news video cameraman, a concert promoter, those sort of people, would be perfect. And they would be. We didn't talk about that within our chat that's going to be on the Extra Mile next week, but that just gives us an opportunity to come back for a second part, doesn't it? Anyway, says Mark, until our next cup of coffee. Oh, I don't know. I think I'm sold on this Venezuelan sipping chocolate now. Eh? Shall we ask for that, pups, later on? When we go to the coffee shop. We're definitely doing the coffee shop today. The coffee shop. See you in the coffee shop. Is that a song, pups?
Running low on the borderlines. Talk is cheap and we're wasting time.
Here's a good contender for vertical pictures. I don't shoot a lot of vertical, I shoot a lot of horizontal. That's the way I usually shoot. This is a sign that just says, what does it say? This is one of our wildlife ponds. Please do not allow dogs in the water. Pups, are you reading that sign? Don't think I'd choose to, let's put those notes down there. Don't think I'd choose to jump in that today anyway. Have you seen there's a light skim of ice on the top? Doesn't look that pleasant to actually swim in. I saw somebody the other day down at one of the other local lakes I walk around who was donning, I didn't see them actually jump in, but they were donning swimming costumes to, here we go, 1250 shutter speed, 160 ISO, f5.6, another vertical. Might just get closer. There we go. Yeah, they were donning swimming cozies, about to jump into the river. I thought, no, not on your Auntie Nellie would I choose to do that in the name of pleasure, or even in the name of fitness. All right, here is one from Sam Hopwood. I wanted to reach out, Neil, and say hello. As a relatively new listener to the Photo Walk, I picked up listening late last year, and I'm now an avid listener as I journey through a return to photography. I grew up with an interest, studied at college when I was young, just as the world moved from 35mm to digital. I left photography behind during that period, where 35mm was becoming, well, so we thought, obsolete. But digital, of any quality, was so prohibitively expensive that I didn't feel it was for me. That was back in the late 1990s. In the following years, I was always interested in making pictures, but only as a spin-off of my great passion for mountain biking and cycling. Well, in late 2024, and 42 years old, I crashed my mountain bike whilst racing, shattered my collarbone and 2 ribs, and was unable to ride. This was the culmination, really, of a torrid year of bereavement, issues in my work, and a diagnosis of ADHD. I felt lost, shattered, and so hopeless, I very nearly drifted back into some of the less positive coping mechanisms I utilised as a younger man in times of grief and sorrow and depression. But out of the blue, I did something that on the face of it could be seen as rash, maybe impulsive. Imagine, he writes this, not me, imagine in brackets somebody with ADHD being impulsive. I went out, bought myself a Sony A7 II and an iPad so that I could do something creative. I wanted to feel like I was making something for a change, rather than just emails and meetings, which I felt was all that was being creative about my work. I wanted to capture things before my terrible memory lets the beauty and the wonder that I see in the world fade into any kind of obscurity. So it's been the most wonderful 4 months since I bought that camera. I've fallen so deeply back in love with photography. And I'm working and studying as if I was, back at college, working towards a degree. I've joined a local club to attend workshops and sessions. I've started shooting 35mm film again and getting those images and some digital ones printed to have a physical copy of what I've created. And I've started a project to create a photo book and a podcast episode making portraits of cyclists. I've been on weekly photo walks with one of my oldest and best friends. I'm off on one in a short while, actually. Plus, I'm studying the work of people like Sean Tucker and the other guests that you featured as I look to create better work technically. So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you and all of your guests and listeners for the part that you've played in helping me to rekindle a creative fire in my soul, that I thought had gone out, but now burns brighter and harder than I ever thought it could. My why or whys with photography are as many and varied as ever. I want to create something. I want to remember things that I see. I want to take part in a culture, a community of creatives, people who look for the beauty and the brilliance of life. And I want to be better. I get all this and more from photography, and I can't wait to see where this adventure is going to take me next. So I hope you don't mind me checking in with this rather lengthy email, and I hope that you won't mind if I keep chipping in from time to time. If you wanted to check out some of my pictures or share them with your other listener, you can find a selection of them here. Sam on the Glass Photography Community. You want to check that out when we get back, pups? I'll definitely leave a link on the show page. In the meantime, Sam, thank you for your honesty and your story in that letter there. I think one of the important things that photography can do is slow us down. And I think digital can do that as well. It's the process, after all, of seeing over the process of the tech, whether you use digital or film. I know. It's all about looking rather than seeing, as the saying goes. And yes, please, more chipping in, always welcome. I'm all for that. We probably should have some kind of first-time letter writer gift, shouldn't we? I've no idea what that might be, of course. But thank you for those that think, I've been listening for a while. I must drop a note in. They're always very welcome. Right, to the first of two parts today of my conversation with guest Jim Richardson. Now, Jim has photographed over 50 stories, 50, yes, for the National Geographic and Traveler, covering everything from volcanic peaks to polar extremes, and even though it's an entirely different direction, his long-term work in rural Kansas is, as you'll hear, equally precious to him. His 1979 photo essay, High School USA, is considered an absolute classic, and he's been named as the photographer's photographer by his National Geographic peers. Two parts to our conversation today. Here comes the first, with Jim Richardson.
Jim, I'm not sure, though it may be correct to suggest that you owe your life of and in photography, not just to your father, who was a fine amateur photographer, but to the fact you don't like cows. And growing up in a small town of less than 2,000 people in Kansas, that facet could be important, couldn't it, really?
Yes. I actually didn't grow up in a town. I grew up, we were country people.
Yeah.
So,
so you were outside that? You were outside that town?
Yes, we were about 5 miles outside of that town. But it was far enough that we did not go to town every day. We went to town on Saturday, because, and then we would see all our friends who were gathered there who would also come in from their farms on Saturday. It was that kind of thing. And it was a big deal. Mom got dressed up to go to shopping, that kind of thing. But we had a farm. We had a dairy farm. And that was just enough exposure for me to understand that I didn't really like cows. Cows are stubborn. They're nice. They can be nice. But I didn't like cows, and I certainly wasn't going to go then into farming. Our farm was already at the time rather smallish for American farms. It would be kind of rather largish for a British farm, I suppose. But no, and so yes, I was always casting about. I was casting about in other things, the things that interested me, things that I could do on a farm, like building model airplanes and model railroads and taking pictures through my microscope and stuff, And you mentioned my dad. Yes, he had a pile of modern photographer magazines there, And then in there, I remember one time I saw a New York photographer with all of these lenses spread out. It was one of these things where they spread them out, out in front of them, the 1,000-millimeter telephotos and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought, oh, that's really cool.
I want myself one of those.
Yeah, exactly, But as much as anything, yeah, that moment, I kind of saw the wonder of lots of lenses and cameras. Yes.
Actually, I love a first camera story. And yours is involved with a trip that you made with your dad, isn't it?
Oh, you mean when he was hauling eggs to Texas?
That's right, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I didn't go on those trips. He always he went on those trips, and he would stop in pawn shops, and he would find really pretty good cameras. You know, a Voigtlander Vitessa L, which was a juicy camera, and for instance, a Zeiss Eichelflex. Now, a Zeiss Eichelflex was the equivalent of the Rolleiflex from Zeiss.
It's a twin lens reflex camera then.
Twin lens reflex camera, and that influenced, by the way, shooting with a twin lens reflex early on trained me up in certain kinds of compositional skills. You compose differently, not just in a square format, but you compose differently with a twin lens reflex because of the position of the viewfinder. Yeah, I could then take that camera and do just all kinds of things. So Dad's stopping at pawn shops. So I'm imagining somewhere in the panhandle of Oklahoma out there, some small town pawn shop, and Dad finds this camera that undoubtedly was purchased by some serviceman in the PX in Germany when he was in there after World War II. You know, it's got a story to it. You know, so
well,
I like. I've still got it up on the shelf here.
Well, I'm delighted to hear, because that would be normally my next question. Have you still got it? You still have. There's a few photographers I've spoken to whose photographic careers happened because of a camera in a pawn shop. I'm thinking of one in particular in the UK where American GIs left a camera, and it was picked up by documentary photographers, and that's the way his career started. It's a shame you didn't. It's a shame you didn't jump the cab with your dad. Can you imagine documenting the places?
I rode with him once or twice, and it was a long saga of country music. It was Hank Williams and and not Willie Nelson. That's too early. But Hank Williams kind of stuff, you know, and he wasn't much of a talker, you know. There was a gulf, so it was an interesting trip. I'm glad I did it, but it didn't become a regular thing.
Oh, I just wondered whether it would have been good for documentary photography, but maybe a bit too early. You describe yourself or your childhood as you were quite a shy child, weren't you? And I think photography is an incredible outlet, isn't it? To see the world, if you like, unannounced. Because if you have a camera, you can find ways to integrate, to be part of things, without having to really feel uncomfortable doing so.
Yeah, there's a bit of a shield quality to it. It gives you a reason to be there and a reason to be watching people. I mean, if you just stare at them, they're going to think you're pretty weird. But if you have a camera in your hand, you know that it somehow transforms the relationship. Yes, and I was small talk was not my forte with people. So yes, having a reason to engage and a bit of a remove was critical, and it became part of my personality as well, of being this weird duck with a camera.
I'm leaping a bit here in terms of your life, but Kansas State University was really where you started to flex your photographic wings, wasn't it? Because this is where you embraced photography, working full-time for student publications. Tell me about that period. Student publications, I don't think we do the same sort of thing in the UK. I think your setup is very different, and I am fascinated by it, and whether it's changed, whether you know it's changed, whether these publications still exist.
They do still exist. I worked for the K-State Collegian, was the name of the student newspaper, and yes, that's the fixture of journalism schools here. That there is a student newspaper, and the students are the editors and the reporters and the photographers, and it's their job to put the paper together every day. And so that it's a very good working relationship. And in fact, you know, you did jump ahead a little bit because I majored in all sorts of things, history and psychology.
Psychology, weren't you? Yeah.
Music and all kinds of things. And I got to be a senior the second semester of my senior year when I decided I didn't want to do psychology as a everyday job. You know, like you'd go to the office and do some psychology. That didn't appeal to me at all. Fascinating to study, but nothing I wanted to do. You know, so I went and I got a job at the student newspaper, and I did assignments for the newspaper, basically. I never took any journalism courses. And in fact, that semester was about the last semester I actually showed up for classes. So I never did graduate. I ended up about 13 credit hours short of getting my degree. And I remained there. I remain short of that degree to this day.
There's always a chance to return and maybe just do that last 30 hours or so.
Well, they made a mistake. As I said, I was 13 hours short when
13, not 30. It was not much.
13, it wasn't much, no, 13. And I always meant to go back. But several years later, the university sent me a letter, and they said that the degree requirements had changed.
Oh.
And now I was only 11 hours short. Oh. And I thought, I've done nothing and I've gained 2 hours of credit here, So I thought, how about if I just wait them out? Let's just see. And about 50 years later, they came back and said that they wanted to give me an honorary degree.
Yeah, well, it was worth waiting out then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it worked.
Yeah. It worked. High School USA was made around about this time, wasn't it? You'd have been
a little bit later, but
a little bit later. Mm-hmm. You'd have been in your your late 20s, early 30s.
I would have been. Just about 30 when I started that.
So
75.
The project itself. Tell me about that and why you decided to make that project. Because gaining the trust of students much younger than you was part of that process, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I didn't think they were much younger than me. I still thought I was quite young, actually.
I think we all still think that to this day.
I think I was 28, so I could fancy that I wasn't that old. Yes, I had started going back and photographing rural Kansas, the places I grew up, very much driven by people like Henri Cartier-Bresson, photographing rural France. And I wanted to show the value of the place. I wanted to show the inherent worth, if you will. So I had been doing that. And as part of that project, one day I was driving along through the town of Rossville, Kansas. And the high school was over on the side. And I thought, I'll pop into there and see if I could take pictures for a couple of days and add that to my work. Just sort of, small town high school life. Well, 3 years later, we had published it in Life magazine and published the book High School USA. I spent 3 years doing photography there. I just got embedded, really. And in that kind of situation, yes, for the first couple of weeks, I stuck out as an oddity, what's going on here kind of thing. But then after you get to tell the story of why you're there enough times, and people get used to you, they start treating you like the janitor. You're not invisible, but you're nothing to notice. And in fact, I think that's a photographic talent that you really have to develop as a documentary photographer. You have to be a bit boring. If you keep talking to people, they'll never ignore you. They'll never get back to their life. It will always be about their life in engaging with you. So at some point, I think you have to shut up and you have to just look like a little bit of a dud. And pretty soon people will go, okay, I've got more interesting stuff to do. And they'll be back at their life and you'll be taking insightful pictures of what's going on. So that kind of thing.
Were you given total freedom? Here are the corridors, walk them and do what you wish, Jim? Pretty
much. It's remarkable. I don't think you could ever do it again.
No, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, because I think these days, even if you were offered that opportunity, there'd be so much more camera awareness, wouldn't there?
I think there would be camera awareness unless you were shooting with an iPhone.
Yeah.
And then you'd look like everybody else wandering around texting each other, But camera awareness, media awareness at least, yes, that. But I just don't think you would get that kind of access to young people, not chaperoned, not looked over every moment about what you might be showing, because I was not showing academic work. I was showing adolescent life, the angst and wonder of being a teenager, growing up and discovering who you are and who you want to be. And the relationships with other people, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't much about classroom academics. It wasn't even really much about sports, except sports as it related to the sense of belonging or character development of the students doing it.
Did the school have a different agenda to you in terms of what they were hoping the project would become? There was a fascinating, fabulous photograph, a wonderful picture of two couples. One sat in the foreground on the steps, one couple. Looks like just off the school corridor, perhaps. And then there's another couple having a private moment just next to the lockers, completely unaware of your presence.
Pretty much I could do that. Yes, I could plop down in front of them, and you give a little bit of a nod, and then they just go on with their discussions. Yes, that kind of thing. I must say though, that's a nice moment that you mentioned there, because I never took that for granted, never wanted to take that for granted, that I was being given a gift right then and there of them letting me into their life. And it was a very special moment. That's, I think, in documentary photography, every once in a while we get those moments when you're standing there and you're thinking to yourself, this is really something out in front of me here. What an incredible moment to be here, to be part of this. Yes. And while the work was always about, essentially, that's the job, is how do you get your camera positioned in front of something special like that? What is it you do? And it's a whole complex of things about how you form relationships, how you act, what you perceive to be important, the goals of the pictures, and all those kind of things. Because you have to actually, as you're walking along, you have to actually realize there's something there. Because it's really easy to just walk by something and only later realize that, I missed it. Well, I was so dumb. Yeah,
it was a reasonably long project. You had quite a time on that, 3 years.
Yes. And by the way, we should go back and say the reason I could do that was because the principal, a guy named Lee C., understood. He was a really out of the ordinary school administrator. He was not bureaucratic. He was totally focused on the students and their development and their potential in life and all of the things that were going on in their life. And so we were very in sync about what we thought was important to students and the value of showing it. I mean, he fully was on board with exactly what I was doing and wanted to do. And I learned from him as well during long discussions about how the lives of the students worked. And that instructed me about what to go looking for and what to pay attention to. So it was a very symbiotic relationship.
Well, it was a long relationship as well, 3 years. But that pales into insignificance when we talk about 40 years of documentation of life in Cuba. And the Cuba I'm talking about is Cuba, Kansas. Now, it was pretty close to the where you grew up. It wasn't far away, but this town, 140 residents, it's tiny. But across 40 years means you really got to see and understand generational change. Was that the point of the project? Well, a town of 140, what were you hoping to document?
Well, when I started, it might have been closer to 300. So, and I probably barged in sort of self-assured that I knew what I was doing and that I was photographing the death of a small town. Unfortunately for me and my photographic ego, they didn't think they were dying, and they kept doing stuff. And so after a while, I kept going back and expecting things to be closed up, but it wasn't. They were throwing one more festival and doing one more harebrained fundraising event or something like this. And so after a while, I had to. I learned from them, and the whole focus of the project had to change. And I had to realize how shallow my initial perceptions of what was going on there were, and gravitate to a much more complex things, because otherwise I would have been spending endless hours shooting dramatic black and white pictures of the sides of houses that were rotting away, that sort of dramatic black and white documentary kind of pictures. And that just didn't work because that wasn't what was going on. I had to be doing people pictures. I had to be doing pictures of the kinds of things that were of interest to them, that would reveal the context of their lives and how they thought about life. And then finally, to the whole goal level of that It wasn't just about a small town on the Great Plains. It certainly wasn't because this was some special small town. Now, usually documentary projects, somebody says, well, this is the last existing uncontacted tribe of the Amazon, or it's the smallest or the biggest or the, something like that. It wasn't any of those. There just wasn't anything like that to distinguish it. There was nothing I could write into grant proposals saying why we should cover this place. Nothing like that. What eventually emerged to me, though, was the concept of that it was about community. It was about community building. And the great thing about it was that while people in cities, New York, London, imagine the community to be contiguous with the city and to exist constantly everywhere out on the streets and all, they simply take the everyday business of commerce as being the community. And in a small town, that wasn't the case at all. The community would form and dissolve. It was very ephemeral. It was very intentional. They understood what they had to do to bring people together to do these things. And so that's what my eventual focus was on. My eventual understanding was essentially the art and science of building community in a place that is actually bereft of the usual sorts of resources. Yeah. There are no mountain scenes out there. There's no beaches. There's no, there are just none of the kind of things that people make their decisions about, usually about where they go to live.
I suppose you could say you were, in a sense, a local. You weren't far off your own beaten track. However, in a small town like that, 300 or 140, I would imagine it's very tight. And a photographer coming in and telling a story about people, did it take a while to become accepted? I know now you are, because you're an honoured citizen of Cuba after all this time, and so you should be. They've bestowed you that honour. But when you start a 40-year project, there's an awful lot of, I want to say bridge building, perhaps that's the wrong phrase, but there's an awful lot of building to be done in terms of relationship anyway.
Sure. Well, I had a couple of advantages. I kind of spoke the language. And by the way, I had no idea of spending 40 years when I started. It was just that I kept always enjoying it and finding things of values, and I didn't see any reason to stop. So there's no grand, selfless mission here. It's just me doing what I want to do. But when I started there, much the same kind of thing as starting at the high school. But I did speak the language. I come from a rural area of farmers, and I could say, when I went into the tavern and introduced myself, I could say, I'm Jim Richardson. I'm Ralph and Beth Richardson's son from over north of Belleville. And they say, well, was that your dad that had the gas station? I'd say, no, that was my Uncle Harold. Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay, so that was an advantage.
And I could speak that, but just graphically and photographically, then I also could speak the language in understanding what people did and how they did it and the patterns of their lives and how that brought value to things. And by way of explanation, I might tell you one little story here.
Please do.
When I was in college, and I was in ROTC, the Reserve Officer Training Corps, and I went off to summer camp, and I turned out that the guy I bunked with, they had the 2-level bunks, was also a classical music fan, and he was from Brooklyn or something like that. I tried to explain to him the nature of my town, and he said, so 3,000 people, he said, I suppose you don't have a full symphony orchestra, do you? What do you have? Do you have a chamber orchestra? So the gulf opened up there between us. And I thought, no, sometimes the high school band plays concerts in the summer on the front steps of the county seat. Come on. So anyway, I understood those things.
During this time, you were making a project for 40 years. You weren't embedded, obviously, with the town for all that time. There was a lot of newspaper work going on for you. That was what was paying your way. Denver Post.
Sure.
Now, I'm going to leap about a bit now, though. You've of course, I want to talk about National Geographic. You've made over 50 stories for National Geo. It's a relationship you've had since 1984. But I think that relationship, really the start of it, was because of Cuba, wasn't it? This project that you were working on.
Yes, that was one of the things. Because one of the reasons that I did that very first story for National Geographic was that I had been invited to be on the faculty of a workshop, and another faculty member was one of the editors at National Geographic. And during that workshop, I showed a couple of projects. One of them was some pictures from Cuba, and I was already kind of known for that stuff by then. And also I showed pictures of the flooding of the Great Salt Lake in Utah, which I had done for the Denver Post magazine. And the editor invited me to come to Washington while I was back east, and he'd get some editors together, and would I show them this stuff? And so I showed them the flooding of the Great Salt Lake and explained what was going on, and they gave me an assignment to do that. So yes, those kind of oddball connections. I just always, I always assumed, and it tended to work, was that if you did the pictures, they would eventually find a home. And one of the people in that room when I showed the Great Salt Lake, though, also was the guy who would become, Bill Allen, who would become the editor of the magazine. And almost 20 years later, he came back and asked if National Geographic could do a story on Cuba, Kansas. So sometimes they have really long gestation periods.
And Jim Richardson will return soon for part 2 of our conversation. I do feel today like we're getting a wonderful workshop in how the process of being published works, particularly when it comes to stories in National Geographic, and part 2 continues in that vein. Now I know I'm making some sketchbook images today, some pictures to show where I've walked today, and I know there's a good vertical, a good upright coming along in the more security fences, in the security fences that guard what used to be the silos that held the nuclear warheads that sat on the back of flat trucks that were supposed to be taken out to different parts of Berkshire in secret. I think some of them were due to go on aircraft. Other ones were just going to be taken out and positioned and fired from launchers. Oh, frightening thought. So I'm not near it yet, but when I get there, I'll get a sketchbook picture. There's a new assignment for the month to come soon. Plus, I'll reveal the recipient of the famous, not so famous flask for January. Now, we've had some reasonably weighty subjects of late from our interviewees. Claire Thomas, in episode 466, yes, talked about the human connection in the theatre of battle. Dana Sterling talked about how photography can be an anchor in terms of mental health. That was episode 462. And a couple of weeks back, in episode 467, Ted Soki took time away from the LA fires, which he was covering very close up to, clean his kit and explain what toll covering something as devastating as that can take. And I had a letter on the back of that from Dennis Linden, MD, along with a pamphlet, digital one, that he'd made featuring fires he photographed at the turn of the decade. I'm hoping that by the time you'll hear this, there'll be some pictures of Dennis's on the show page that show his own skill in covering this kind of really very important documented event. Dear Neil, says Dennis, as I listened to the recent podcast about the wildfires in Los Angeles, I couldn't help but think back to 2020, when my community suffered the loss of nearly 4,000 homes. This prompted me to look back through my photos, and I have many wildfire photos affecting communities that I've either lived in or visited going back 20 years now. In 2020, the Alameda fire in Oregon claimed over 4,000 structures, but thankfully few lives. A firefighter, who was a patient of mine at the time, told me that they couldn't even begin to control the fire because propane tanks would explode, as well as people having massive stockpiles of ammunition which began to cook off during the fire. That was something I'd not even considered when it was mentioned by Ted, and now you've mentioned it again, Dennis, that the ammunition in houses would, I have this, and Ted sort of drew a picture of it, of ammunition firing off in lots of different directions. And of course, you can't be a firefighter, definitely not photographer in those sort of situations, not knowing what's going on from what direction. Nobody could approach those places, says Dennis. The primary reason the fire spread from home to home to home was the wind. As soon as the wind reaches 50 miles an hour, there's just no controlling the fire. Anyway, I produced this pamphlet back in 2020 for my own records. I thought I'd share it with you, as you might find it interesting, which I did. What I found particularly potent were the signage pictures, which you've used really so very well. You've used to tell the narrative of what was once there, which now isn't. And sometimes irony within the wording on the signage. So yeah, very powerful work. Thank you so much for that, Dennis. And I should say that Dennis produced another piece of work as a photographer and a doctor. And that was a story, a very personal story, about going into hospital for a heart transplant as a patient and his recovery after. I've got the book. And I've read it, I've looked at it, and I'm going to have a good chat with Dennis about it, because it's a really powerful piece of work. So Dennis Linden will be on the show at some stage shortly with that incredible personal story of his. You see, you can make pictures about just the most extraordinary things, can't you, that affect you personally as well. Maybe there's a catharsis to that process. Right, I've got another upright. Just let me get this. This is, it looks like it would have been some kind of bunker. Maybe a protection area or something. It's, can you go inside it, pups? I think you can, can't you? Hold on. Oh, you can. Look at this. It looks like there's generators, bits of generators and things. Wow, let's come out of... All right, let's get a picture. The entry to it is staggered concrete, as it were. So I suppose you have the ability to walk through a blast area. I don't know, I'm making that bit up. But it's certainly... Out of the way, pups. I've got your tail in the shot. Come here. Stop clicking at me. I'm sorry, I don't mean to do that. Quite rude, you're right. Right. 950 shutter speed, 5.6 ISO 160, and let's expose for the shadows a bit more on this one. Another upright, pups. You're looking hopeful. What do you want? Do you want one of these? Go on then. You've been very good. Here we go. Bit of ASMR. Another one. Please, sir, can I have some more? There we go. Isn't the bird song lovely? Hey? Wonderful. Looking for uprights for my sketchbook pictures today. It being February the 7th, as this show goes out, Jan's assignment is now done, of course. A new one can start for the month of February. It's, I thought I'd say this as well. It's never too late to enter. I know sometimes, I've had emails from people who say, oh, is it too late now? Am I too late? Oh, am I getting this in just in time? Yes, in terms of, there is a cut-off in terms of winning the famous, not so famous flask. But no, you're never too late. It's always wonderful to receive your entries to the assignments. And I know that some folk listen weeks, months after the episode officially, the official release date. So yeah, please keep sending them in, and I'll keep populating the pages with your assignment pictures, because I think it's as much about inspiration as it is about winning the famous, not so famous flask. And, this one is very hard in terms of choosing who's going to go away with a flask, because we've had, so far, 120-ish entries. It's been amazing. It's the most popular one that we've ever had. So thank you so much. It was about the colour red, That was what Ted Forbes said, a photograph that shows the colour red. Sometimes it was subtle, sometimes it was blur, it was definitely a red picture. They were fantastic. Thank you for all of them. Thank you for your interpretations of that particular challenge. Oh look, here's the fence I was talking about. This is definitely upright, an upright picture, a vertical picture composition. Let's get one. Here we go. Doesn't mean you can't work in terms of diagonally capturing it. And that's what I'm going to do. Here we go. Looks like no man's land. Fences, walls. Ooh, that's a bit topical at the moment. Lovely, deep blue sky today. And 1700 shutter speed now. There we go. A sketchbook photo for the show page today. Come on, pups. Right, assignments, yes. Let's try and find in inverted commas here, winner. You're all winners, oh, Neil. Honestly, you'd be a good primary school teacher. Everybody's a winner here today. Well, they are. I wish I had 120 flasks to send out. Dominic Sagar's one definitely had me thinking. Taken in Colorado, looking down into the valley from Lookout Mountain. If ever there was an appropriately named mountain. It seems the only thing of colour in the valley. And this isn't a spot colour picture where the photo is turned into black and white, then you pick out in Photoshop a colour, that's spot colour. This isn't one of those. No, this is the Coors beer factory from a real distance, surrounded by a town and buildings and traffic that are all rather grey. And the only thing that really sticks out in the valley is the big Coors sign on the side of the factory. I thought that was particularly good. Reminded me actually of the McDonald's sign. Who do we talk to about that? Oh, that's going to bug me. Do you remember that photograph? Oh, fantastic American commercial photographer. I know you're shouting it at me now. You need to... I'm obviously not hearing you. Speak up. Anyway, that will bug me for the rest of the walk. So, sometimes the red was subtle, and I'd say that was a beautifully subtle narrative, that one. Other times, as I say, it was very blah. And Ted Forbes, who set it, I'm hoping he might come back onto the show. I dropped an email, but unfortunately, I think he's a bit busy right now. But I'm hoping he might come back and do a YouTube film where we don't pick out a winner as such, because I'm about to do that now, but we talk about some of the pictures that you've sent in. I think that might be a nice thing to do with the YouTube channel. But in meantime, I've chosen one that particularly speaks to me. Or actually, this one I can hear. It's a picture of a gas station in the night as snow falls. A small local gas station with only one pump. And honestly, I can hear the quiet in this picture. I really can. You know that sound when snow is falling? The sound that seems to it swallows all other sounds. You don't hear anything but this gentle, beautiful falling of snow. That's what this picture not only looks like, but sounds like to me. Matt Bobby, then, is the artist behind this particular picture. And he writes, I often drive past this small gas station, each time thinking there's a photograph to be made there. It doesn't look like much during the day. There's usually a lot of traffic, but I thought a nighttime photo might be the way to go. Well, last Sunday at 10:30 p.m, with the snow falling and Ted's red assignment definitely on my mind, I thought, perfect time to make a photo. And I'm glad I did. I do have this thing, Matt, about gas stations. This isn't the reason why you won, by the way. It's a fantastic picture, but I am a sucker. I have a soft spot for gas station pictures. The Eggleston pictures in particular of gas stations, quiet gas stations, semi-illuminated ones and so on and so forth. I love those. I can look at book loads of gas station pictures all day long. But I like your one because of the quiet, and it did bring back some memories of a gas station I used to drive past every single day many, many years ago. It was en route to Cambridge. I lived in a place called Hertford. About 40 miles up the road I had to travel each day to Cambridge, the famous university town-stroke city. And I passed this gas station that had long closed, and every day I looked at it thinking, oh, that at the time I wasn't into photography, but maybe there was an early photographic sort of thing about that place that I just wanted to capture I certainly wanted to live in it. I remember that. I remember thinking, I wonder if I could approach the owners. It looks like an amazing place to convert into a house. Anyway, that was never to be. But yes, well done. You win the famous, not so famous flask for this month. I love the picture itself. I love the quietness of the photograph. I love the accent of the red. It works really so very well. And I love the sound of the picture too. So, and thank you to all the other entries that came in. They were all fantastic. They really were. And what a successful assignment that's been. Now, here comes your challenge for this month. I will tell you how you take part in a moment, and I have a feeling that this one could attract a decent response as well. It is set by next week's guest, actually, David Wright.
The Photo Walk assignment.
A one-word assignment. I am amazed that we have not had this word before.
I'm amazed too, because particularly with portraiture, I'm going to have to say eyes, because
eyes.
It's everything. I mean, that's the connection in the photograph. Obviously, people can take that a whole lot of different ways. The obvious way is, through the connection of eyes in a portrait. But let's see what people, what other roads people go down with that. I can't wait to see what people send in.
Well, when we talked for the interview, I remember you telling me the story about the black bear and the grabbing of the arm and the fact that mum's beady eyes were looking you straight in the eyes. What did you feel, by the way, at that moment? I didn't ask you during the interview. I think abject horror might be one of them, because she had a bit of a hold on your arm at the time. Can you remember what you were feeling as you were looking into those steely eyes?
I think I'm an unusual individual in that, and I don't know if this is a good thing, but I think I have a coping mechanism that allows me to be in some very dangerous situations and actually be, I don't want to say disconnected from them, but keep a calm, and that's been everything from being in a war zone to being in many situations with wild animals. So surprisingly, I actually felt very calm during that moment, and time sort of slowed down. And I think it probably says something bad about me as a human, because I probably should have been screaming or scared. But, it's like, I think I have this sort of, I don't know what you call it. Is it disassociation? I don't know what the word is.
Maybe.
But,
I mean, the eyes, returning to my radio training, when I was given the job of, you know what vox pops are, don't you? Voice of the population. So usually they give it to the junior in the newsroom. Is go and get the vox pops about X, Y, Z for the day. And it was always me. I learned very quickly, though, to be comfortable asking people to say something on a microphone. But I always remember a producer saying to me, the most important thing you do when you go out to do these is look them in the eyes as you're asking. So many people look down at the floor. And I would imagine this goes for photography as well. When you go out to make a portrait of somebody, you're actually asking while looking at their feet, or a lot of people are, when this eye connection that's the way to... Have you ever heard of the open... We've sort of gone off on one here. Have you ever heard of the open window strategy in London when you're driving?
I haven't, no. Tell me about that.
This works. Not all the time, but a lot of the time it works. So if you're trying to pull out at a junction, nobody will let you out, certainly not in London. It's just a thankless task. But if you wind down your window and there's no barrier between you and them, you notice the amount of people that will let you out. I know you're probably thinking that's a load of old codswallop, Neil. It works, trust me.
No, I believe you. Because
I got that from a taxi driver told me that one.
Yeah, I know. I absolutely believe you, because for me, it's like I've photographed people all around the world, and often people where I share no language with somebody, but it's all about the eyes and making a connection. Yeah. And it is that connection of the eyes and a smile, and suddenly, you've got that portrait. Yeah. So it is all about that, that eye-to-eye connection.
So best of luck. Send your pictures to stories@photowalk.show, stories@photowalk.show. If you can resize them to 2,500 pixels wide, you are an absolute, what do we say? Star, Neil? Yes, star. No watermarks, no borders, please, but do include links to your social feeds, your website, your Flickr, your Glass, or wherever we can enjoy more of your work, including Substack. And also, if you can, send me some thoughts about the picture, if you think that helps with the storytelling. All the pictures and stories will go on the assignments page, so do make sure it's original, OVS. And if you're okay about it, it's nice to feature some on the Photowalk Instagram page so that we can show the work of our amazing community. So good luck, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you see in the eyes that you photograph. Walking across the middle of the common here, I've sort of run out of vertical or upright pictures at the moment. I know there's some trees and bushes here, but I don't just want this to be pictures of trees and bushes. Keep your eyes peeled, pups. Let's see what we can find. I did suggest this week will be the first of the... No, I've got to do Teach Me Street, just a reminder. Would you bear with me for a second? Yes, I did suggest this week might be the first, or would be the first, of the Teach Me Street episodes that I've recorded with Valerie Jardin. But because we had a slightly longer assignment feature today, I'm saving that to next week. So Teach Me Street starts next week with Valerie. I'll tell you how you can become a part of that as well. Of course, pups, come around here. This is, didn't realise I was taking you for a mud bath today. There we go. That's what happens when you go off the beaten trail, which I do like to do. Look at me, I'm trying to find the drier route. He's gone straight through the mud. Coffee shop. What are they going to say, pups? Really? Right, set coordinates, Scotty, for Australia land. Final letter on the show today from Carl Attwood. Hi, Neil. It's been a while since I've written, so I thought I'd say hi. I know, Carl. Where have you been? You don't write anymore, you don't send cards. But this letter is a good story, so here we go, kids, settle down. Over the past couple of years, as I mentioned in a previous letter, I shifted away from automotive and motorsport, and I've been exploring my passion for street photography. It's been somewhat challenging, though, here in Perth, Australia land. Obviously, it being a quiet city, but I've made it a habit to head out every weekend, whether it's in the Perth Central Business District, Fremantle, or indeed at local events. Local events are fantastic places to flex. We'll get there in the end. To flex your street photography muscles, they really are. Summer shows this year. I think I'm going to spend a lot of time at summer shows. That's what I'm looking forward to doing, because I made some cracking pictures last year. Pictures that interested me anyway at summer shows, so they can be a good place. Along the way, he said, I've connected with a great group of like-minded people, and we regularly meet up for photo walks. During this time, I've gone through a lot of change and reflection about what I actually want from my photography and how I pursue my passion. In late 2023, I rediscovered film photography and absolutely fell in love with the process, the tactile experience and the results. And since then, I've transitioned most of my work to 35mm film and even learned to process black and white film myself. It's been challenging at times. I'm not the most patient person, but the rewards have been worth it. There's a unique thrill in waiting to see the results and the satisfaction when everything comes together as planned. Part of the appeal of film for me was the desire of something physical and tangible. And this also led me to start printing more of my work as well. At the end of 2023, I shared my favourite street photographs and created a zine. I wanted something I could hold and flip through and share with family and friends. I even sold a couple of copies. I used Mixam for the printing and found them to be a great value. Now, this is really important because it's a subject we come back to quite often, who to print books through. And actually, if you want to print stuff that can be then seen by people around the world without having really awkward customs issues with posting books out, etc., there's a few different options. Blurb is one we've talked about before. I know Mixam is clearly another. And you're not the first to mention Mixam to me of late. I got the feeling one of those voices that mentioned Mixam was that of Sean Tucker. I know he does use XYZ to print, or he has done. And I love the way that he... And have you got it yet? His latest parable? I think it's out now. Must check. But I love the printing that he has for that particular zine. And I did a quick googly eyes on Mixam, and I saw that they are, quote, the leading online print platform that creates customizable print products for and this bit's important, global audience. So watch this space. There's an idea that I have. Kyle, thank you for the inspiration. Anyway, says Kyle, this year I created another zine featuring a selection of my favourite photos from 2024. It's been fascinating to see how my work has evolved, especially as I transitioned into a new medium. I've noticed that I'm now more focused on capturing stories in my images rather than just random candid portraits. Thank you for all the work you do with the podcast. It's a highlight of my week and a constant source of inspiration. You are very generous. He is. I will leave a link to Kyle's Instagram. I was having a scooch through your work, actually, Kyle. Life in Perth looks, as you would say, bonza. And I like the way that you're dipping into what looks like different film stocks. That event that I saw at, where is it? Hillary's Harbour, called the Milk Carton Regatta, that you made a picture or two of. What is that? I need to know more. Tell me the story behind this eccentric event. Right, back for part 2 of my chat with today's guest, I think, Jim Richardson. Who would like a photo project pitching lesson? Hands up. Saddle back, class. Pin your lug holes back, as they say. That includes you, my other listener. Are you chewing, by the way, other listener? I thought we had a rule about that, about chewing gum. Here's the second part of my chat with Jim Richardson.
I'm intrigued by who pitches who in these situations at National Geographic. I mean, are you taking stories to them? Or is it simply a one-way street where they send you on assignment? Or are you able to? I know it takes time with relationships to say, look, you need to be doing this. This is. And we're going to talk about the environment in a short while, but you need to be making stories like this.
You know, I think the worst way to be a photographer is to sit by your phone and wait for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
No, you have to be a generator of material. And that can be pictures, it can be projects, it can be ideas. For me, with National Geographic, it was about writing story proposals. And I mean, some of the things came to me because of my background, but I would guess, if I had to put a number on it, I would say about 70% of the stories that I did for National Geographic were things that I wrote a proposal on.
Right.
Or came about as a secondary thing after an initial story, or a carry-on, or a piece of the story that didn't really get used, and we expanded it into another story. But yes, the idea generation, and that was common at National Geographic, as opposed to, say, the New Yorker. You know, I mean, that's a word-driven publication, and they don't really want to hear ideas from photographers. But National Geographic always wanted to hear ideas from photographers, and it was always wise to be storing up material that in a year or 2 years, 4 years, you could put together into a story proposal, because it was always, it was never staff. I was always a freelancer, contract to contract, story to story. And you always felt that you could survive one mediocre story, but you couldn't survive two. So you always had to be thinking. And I say that for a very specific reason. It is because one of the worst things I think that you can do is to be the person who is following along after the writer. The writer is going out doing this text. The text gets approved. It gets sent to some picture editor. The picture editor comes to you and says, go take pictures of these things on this list. It's a terrible way to be a photographer. It almost guarantees you're going to be photographing mediocre stuff. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do those proposals was because I wanted to do the architecture of the story so that it was inherently photographable from the get-go.
And the text would follow you.
Yeah, if I could. I wanted the writer following me if I could.
Yeah.
Bill Bryson was one of those people.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Bill.
I had proposed, and we'd gotten approved a story on Orkney, and I had already read Bill Bryson's Notes from a Small Island, and he never got to Orkney. He wanted to. He got up to John O'Groats, and he wanted to go on over, but he didn't. And so it came then on these years later, and this Orkney story, and lo and behold, they picked Bill Bryson to do that. And he was a great professional. I mean, no ego, no problem, comes to me, takes all of my research, takes all my contacts, does his own. He's a real pro, somebody great to work with. And the dovetailing of the pictures and his text was just beautiful because he was so good.
I was about to ask, over all that period, aside the ones that we've talked about or will talk about, is there a particular project that stands out? Working with Bill Bryson must be one, surely.
No, sure. That was a great fun. Yes, of course. All of the Scotland work, of course, that got to be sort of a ongoing, recurring habit. Just going back to Scotland, figuring out another piece of the place that I hadn't gone before. The Outer Hebrides and then the Inner Hebrides and Whiskey Country and all that kind of stuff.
Well, we both share a love of the Highlands. In fact, funnily enough, when I first wrote to you, I think I was in the Highlands, you were in the Highlands, and it's taken us a little bit of time to actually put this together. But you do have a photographic obsession. 25 years worth. I think it comes initially from not having a story for your editor about England. Am I wrong with that? You said, well, I haven't got anything about England, but let me give you the real prize.
Tom Kennedy, the director of photography, he owed me one because I had gone out and done this thankless story on the Ogallala Aquifer in western Kansas and the Great Plains, and basically it's an aquifer is underground water. Talk about something that's hard to see.
God, yeah.
Underground water, yeah. And I'd pulled it off, I'd done it. So several months later, he called me back and he said, I know you would like to do a story in England. And I said, I don't have a story in England, but I do have a story on Scotland. Would you like to do that? And I said, oh, yeah, sure. I'll raise my hand it sounded like fun, And of course, at the time, though, I knew nothing. I mean, really, pathetically knew nothing. I couldn't find Edinburgh on a map, probably. It would take me some time to find it, that much lack of knowledge. But I just did what I always do. I dove in and started digging into the guidebooks and reading the books and, all the usual kind of things you do to try and bring yourself up to speed about a place.
Wasn't that initial assignment to tell the story of the place in 20 images?
That's about how it comes down to, yes.
Yeah. A hard task in the Highlands.
It is. And this was the whole country story.
Yeah.
It was, and it wasn't really, it was kind of an old-timey National Geographic story, a country story.
Yeah.
We did those kind of things, and which would end up with headlines kind of like, the wonders of white bread, Scotland, land of kilts and whiskey or something, but it's very difficult because you are going to end up, well, you might shoot 1,000 rolls of film, and I probably did, those 35,000 pictures, Yeah, you're going to end up at 20 pictures, and so each of those pictures has to carry a lot of weight and do a lot of things, and they can't be just record pictures. Here's what Edinburgh Castle looks like, and here's what Heather looks like, kind of pictures. They have to do more than that. So yes, it was tough, and it was agonizing. I just knew, talk about imposter syndrome, and I just knew I was failing, and it was going to be horrible, and my wife kept telling me to buck up and keep going, and it would work out, and it did work out, and then the Orkney story followed along that, and then pretty soon I convinced the editors of National Geographic Traveler, that we should do Edinburgh during the festival on Fringe.
Yeah.
And then I kept taking them out for whiskey at a bar in Washington that had 100 single malt whiskeys, and they eventually, it took about 8 months for them to then have the light bulb go off that maybe they could ask me to do whiskey country. And that's the kind of the process. It just kind of kept carrying on.
There's some wonderful stories of whiskey stories, aren't there? I always remember visiting Glen. Have you been to Glenfiddich? Is that one of the ones you've been to?
Yes, yeah. I have, yes.
Do they still have the cat that sits on the tin roof that rolls off because it's apparently smelling the whiskey as it's being made? Or is that some old tale that they tell visitors? I love that. I remember it from a childhood. I went back there again, and they're still telling it years later.
Are they really? No, I never heard that. And but I see several fallacies in there, Neil. I'm sorry.
Of course, I want to turn to the environmental work. It's really important. With the horrific scenes unfolding before our eyes in Los Angeles as we're talking today.
Oh my, yes.
This seems a pertinent time to talk about your own work in terms of the environment. At what point did you think, well, look, my photographs, they show they can highlight just what's happening in this world. I've got an important thing to say above documenting people in towns and schools. And at what point did that work start, where you thought, right, I can deliver this message? I mean, the Colorado, A River at Risk, I mean, that was published in 92, so
right,
that's 30 odd years ago.
That was one that landed in my lap. I was not the progenitor of that, although I essentially took a story that was an adventure story, the wonders of the Colorado River, and turned it into a water story, a water resource story. Right. So that was a transitional point for us doing that story. So I had that experience. Along the way, there were several other stories that came along. For instance, I got called in to help out with a story on wetlands, because essentially the photographer who's the assigned name photographer was a great bird photographer and had wonderful pictures of birds in wetlands. But he didn't really have pictures of wetlands. It didn't have pictures of construction equipment destroying wetlands. He didn't have those kinds of pictures, and that's what they needed. So I came in and did some of that. By and by, though, several stories came up that actually turned into essentially environmental stories. One of them would have been the story that I did on the Flint Hills of Kansas. That's an area of tall grass prairie. Because we were doing a series of stories on national parks, and that wasn't a national park proper, but it was a national monument, I think they call it. And it was about the preservation of prairie. Prairies are, they don't get enough attention. They're hard to photograph. There's no nice big mountains out there to fill up your frame. No. There's no beaches. They're hard. But I proposed that, and we did it. And that turned out to have environmental impact, because that was the time in which wind farms were coming in to Kansas, and there were lots of people building wind farms who were lusting after the topography of the Flint Hills and all that tall grass prairie. So it just so happened that our story came out at the same time that great debate was going on about that kind of development of the Flint Hills. So it was a happy circumstance that our story in National Geographic touting the beauty of this place had an important effect. So there were two kinds of audiences for that story. One were people outside of Kansas who didn't know they were there. But more importantly for the environmental effect were the people inside of Kansas who didn't know they were something. I mean, I actually had people who went to a show of my photographs about the Flint Hills say, I drove by that pasture every day going to work, but nobody ever told me it was something. So that just doing beautiful pictures of this place and putting them in the pages of National Geographic had the effect of adding to the enshrinement of this natural place in people's minds and adding fuel to the efforts to preserve them as something that we valued. So that was one of those kind of things. Another one I would mention is the light pollution story that I did.
Well, yeah, and, there's a quote of yours that I've noted down here. Perhaps 80% of the world, or put another way, 4 out of 5 of the children born today may never see the Milky Way again.
Yes, I have used that. It's not mine originally, but it really does get at the tragedy. Because almost everybody remembers the first time they saw the Milky Way, or they remember that they had fireflies, in the summer evenings when they grew up, and they don't anymore, and they wonder why, and so that was one way of taking something abstract like light pollution and giving it context to people about how this fit into their lives, and it was great to do, because back when I did the Flint Hill story, I did a story of the Milky Way, and that was in about 2005, and it was just at the point in which I could use a Canon 5D with a 35 millimeter f1.4 lens at ISO 1600, and you could get the Milky Way to hold still enough that you could do a picture of it.
Yeah.
That was just starting up. And now, of course, Milky Way pictures are, they're all over Instagram. But at that time, it was really tough to do. And 3 years later, the Nikon D3 had come along, and it could do ISO 6400. And they had the 14 to 24 millimeter f2.8 zoom that was really good at 14 millimeters. And with that, you could do a whole Milky Way picture. I don't think people today realize how transitional the technology was in driving our ability to do that story. Yeah, that story ended up having some effect as well.
What would you like to see done to reclaim the night sky?
Well, funny you should mention it. Just yesterday, I saw that Wales got their second night sky preserve. I don't remember exactly where it's at, but you're seeing these things pop up more and more, along with the supermoon movement, in which everybody is enraptured by supermoons. I think there's a lot more now, 20 years on, of people paying attention to the night sky. And so you're getting a lot more interest from local communities of realizing what's going on and just finding a way to turn off the street lights some, tone it down, realize, if we're out on one of those Channel Islands, do we really need street lights, obliterating the night sky? Well, people are doing that. I think that's really quite marvelous.
I think when you choose a life making pictures like you do and have, the story never ends, and you must constantly be in a stage of research and interest. I know that when we started our conversation, before we turned the microphones on, as it were, you said to me, I don't wander out with a camera. That's not me. You won't find me just walking the streets with a camera. But I do think that photographers are never switched off to the possibilities that they see, whether they have a camera on them or not.
Oh yeah. For me at least, if I'm walking the streets with a camera, it's my iPhone, and I take a depressing number of pictures of our dog, our Jack Russell Terrier. So yeah. And if I'm going to photograph the snow that we just had here, it's going to be with that iPhone. And it's really remarkable how it has transformed people's use of photography.
Well, yeah, you actually used
wonderful.
You actually used your iPhone to shoot a whole story for National Geo. Having said that, didn't you?
I've done several of our National Geographic expedition trips with just the iPhone. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Did they know that?
Oh, yeah. David Gutenfelder shot the whole Tokyo story on iPhone, specifically because he walked across Tokyo, 50 miles, I think it is. He did it all with the iPhone, specifically because he shot it all in black and white. And the thing was, out on the streets, if he had his big camera, if he had his Canon or his Nikon or whatever, everybody would be looking at him.
Yeah.
If he picks up his iPhone,
nobody does.
Who cares?
Yeah.
One more tourist with an iPhone, And so the moments that he got were brilliant, but also, it's in black and white and it's on the pages of National Geographic, and an iPhone has abundant image quality for images of that size. I often think that if I could have photographed those initial black and white documentary projects that I did on an iPhone, they would look better than the scans I get from my negatives that I shot with a Leica and a Nikon at the time.
Wow.
I mean, I print big pictures, so I kind of know this stuff.
Yeah.
And yes, the quality is quite amazing.
Are you using any particular contraptions with your different lenses on, or is it the iPhone in front of you? I'm assuming it's the latest and greatest model each time, unless you're about to say to me, no, Neil, I'm still on an 8+.
No, I've got in the next few days, I have a class coming up to teach, so I probably need to go get a 16, but I've got a 15 Pro Max. No, I don't. I always, when I started on the iPhone photography, I kind of made a resolution to myself that I was leaving contraptions behind, and this was going to be the simple side of my photography. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to photograph what I can photograph with the lenses I've got in the camera. I'm not going to be carrying, traipsing around with lots more stuff. None of those big rigs with the handles on the sides and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm intrigued then. I don't ask a lot of tech questions, and I don't want to get stuck on talking about iPhones, but are you shooting in a RAW format, or?
What I'll do is most of the time for the everyday stuff that simply goes on Facebook is just the usual JPEG kind of files. And then if I'm out there at String Lake in the Grand Tetons and it's a brilliant morning and I've got this incredible scene for me, then I'll pop it over to do a RAW of that. Or if there's some sort of particular, like say a night scene on the street that you've got mixed light and mixed color, a RAW file really can help you do that. But not all the time. I don't have space for all those massive RAW files, I'm afraid.
Well, it was fascinating for me to read that you do make stories, and you have made stories for National Geo using an iPhone. I was Jim, really? And it's enthusing, I think, to hear that you're using that sort of technology. Before I ask my final question, it's a bit left field, but has your attitude changed? Do you like cows now?
Well, I've done so many stories on food and agriculture around the world that yes, I do rather like cows. I'm not sure I like them to go out and like hang around, and have a coffee. Probably not. But no, they are wonderful creatures, actually. And I've always, through some of my stories on agriculture, I have come to understand that we think we domesticated the livestock, and in fact, and the crops. In fact, it's just as valid to say that the crops domesticated us, because, if you think about cows, we spend a lot of money spreading cows all over the earth, and time and effort, and cows really picked a good species to domesticate when they picked us, because we do a lot of work for them. We go out and feed them in the morning, and we make sure there's no ice on the water tank, and all those kind of things. So we're kind of slaves to our domesticated crops and livestock. It's a partnership. It's a real partnership.
And it's interesting how much of an impact the environmental story around cattle is as well, of course.
Oh, yes, it is. It is. It sure is.
Jim, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm fascinated to know one thing. What is your why?
Well, I suppose it is something that I could be successful at. I remember on a Saturday afternoon when I was home as a kid and figuring out that I could put a close-up lens on a camera and make a cool picture of chess pieces on a chessboard. So it was something I could do, but eventually what I found was it was something I could do. It was the place where I did have a certain set of talents, and I could make something out of them, and I could make some kind of contribution. And it was nice that I got paid for it. But the thing was that what I really found was the connection was that I could take things that interested me and make them into pictures. And so you were talking about, always finding pictures. Well, I'm kind of always on the lookout for stories, and I keep thinking, I have some friends now who are with the Caithness Brock Project. You ever heard of them?
No.
Up in, where Caithness is, don't you?
I do know Caithness,
And they have brocks up there. Like Musa Brock out on Shetland?
Yes.
A brock.
Yes.
Yeah, a brock, The Caithness Brock Project. And they're going to build a new brock. And I kind of think, that'd be a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
Not just them building it, but you go traveling around, you find all these old brocks, and you take pictures of all this stuff. You can make a nice story out of that. I'm constantly finding those kind of things and kind of wishing I was 28 again.
Well, I was just about to say this sounds like another 25-year project to me.
And my thanks today to Jim Richardson. for his time talking to us about his amazing projects, and I'll, of course, leave links, and there's some photos on the show page. But also, I think for a bit of a workshop in terms of how to promote your work to publishers and organisations. I really appreciate your time in doing that. Remember earlier we were talking about being able to hear a picture. If you could smell a picture, I've just made another upright photograph, one of my vertical pictures today, a sub-challenge within my walk. And I'm at the end of the old airfield here, the old air base, where it's very close to a chutney. Are you being posh, Neil? Chutney factory. And the smell, it always makes me so hungry. It really does. Where are you going, pups? I think he's said, is this the gate to the chutney factory? I know. I tell you what. Should we go in there with some cheese? A little bit of cheese. Be nice, wouldn't it? Huh? Sit down in the corner. Bring me a couple of jars, would you? That's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you'd like to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 125 is waiting for you. It's our extra show. For those who support this podcast through Patreon, you are very precious and very, very, and I mean this genuinely, very much appreciated. And the really special thing about this show is that you become the stars of it. We find out about our wonderful community through our Shoot the Breeze chats, projects and ideas and inspiration. And this week, Extra Miler Andre Brumer joins me, and here's a taster of what's waiting for you right now.
On this week's Extra Mile.
I still remember my first camera that I actually owned and held was a disposable camera that my mom bought for me.
That's so often the story, isn't it?
Fast forward, during the pandemic, I was thinking maybe I should give this photography a go. Maybe I should learn it. And that coincided with the fact that my wife was pregnant at the time, and I was we do need to preserve those memories. So I bought a camera, and kind of the rest is history from there.
There is a definite feeling of Dutchness on the show this week. PS to the show is to come, but before that we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to. I'll think about what's been said today, and it's from Leah de Sal with Tom Mira Harmony, and that's not me dropping my H's, by the way. Wonderful voice from Leah, wonderful ease about the storytelling in this. It's a quiet number. I can almost hear it being the song played on Matt Bobby's radio as he pulled across the street from the gas station, featured in the assignment for January, the photo that took the flask for January's assignment. Some light snow falling, footsteps in the snow. It's like we're actually there with you, Matt. It really is.
Roaming around this forsaken town, finding my way through the silence around. I used to dream of an ocean and crowd. Now I wound up drifting, I could tumble way down. I was shooting an arrow through bright green air, hoping my arrow will find it there. I never mind when there's no one around, but don't dare tell my mother, she will never live it down. I lose my mind every other day, 'cause I gotta find what I'm looking for. Now
That's a song called Tumbleweed. Fabulous, fabulous song. Oh, look, pups. Almost like it's planned. Final sketchbook picture of the show today. We've got an upright here. It's just a post that shows you the way to walk, but it's an upright, and I like the way that we've got deep shadow one side, because it's quite a sunny day today. 1000th shutter speed, f5.6, 160 ISO. Yeah, quite a deep sunshine today. So it's nice we get extreme sun on one side, shadow on the other. Back to that song. Shadow to the left of me, sunshine to the right. So, a few closing thoughts before the PS. My sincere thank yous to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. We had our meeting earlier this week of Extra Milers, our Zoom live show. Two, we do one for the Southern Hemisphere, one for the North. And we had a chinwag about some particular plans. Oh, hang on. Cyclist going by. Pups, come here. There we go, I'll let you go. Have a nice cycle. Pups, come here. Come on. Don't start chasing cyclists. Really. Yes, we had a chat about some plans moving forward with the Extra Mile community, and I'm quite excited about some of the ones that you suggested. Listen to this space. We'll have more. I'll say all will be revealed. More will be revealed shortly. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell, who looks after our Facebook members, with further research by Michael Mixon. Right, a postscript for the show today. It's from Elliot Erwitt. And I think since we've been talking about the art of storytelling today, something from Elliot is absolutely perfect. Elliot Erwitt said, "To me, photography is an art of observation. It's about finding something interesting in an ordinary place. I found this has little to do with the things you see and everything to do with the way you see them."
The Photo Walk is a Loading Zone production.